Here we go. Welcome to episode 11 of the Save the Second podcast. Today is Sunday, November 17th, 2019. In this episode, we'll be discussing our special guest. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to have her. Genevieve Jones from holdmyguns.org. We'll be discussing Wayne LaPierre's outrageous 2018 paycheck, how you can help us in reforming our NRA, and more. Rob Pincus will be joining us here in just a few moments. Of course, you all know him, but you probably don't know Miss Genevieve Jones. Genevieve, how are you today?
I am fantastic. I'm so stoked to be here. Thank you so much for asking me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was just kind of spur of the moment. I was actually listening to your podcast on TGC, with Matt Christensen, the TGC podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if she'll be able to jump on our podcast sometime. So thank you so much for joining us. And hey, there's Rob Pincus. Mr. Rob,
hey, Rob.
How are you today?
Hey, what's up?
Dude.
Greetings from the...
Oh, as always, he goes robot. You went robot for a little bit, but hey, man, it's good to have you, Rob. Thanks for joining us, man. Yeah, so Genevieve, man, you're the person behind the scenes at, well, really one of my favorite events, the TGC panel. Oh my gosh, I haven't got to attend one yet, but I've watched every one of them, and repeatedly too. It's awesome. I love it. You've been behind the scenes there since the beginning, and yeah, just so happy to have you with us. First of all, can you tell everybody, a lot of people may not have heard of you before, how did you get into firearms in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much. Hosting that panel behind the scenes is quite a lot of work with event planning, and I have come to very much hate event planning, but it is what it is, and it always turns out pretty well, so I'm happy that you enjoy watching it. I hope I could see you in person one year. Basically about me, my dad has been shooting for forever. He was in the FBI for a brief amount of time when I was really, really young. And I started shooting when I was about 10 years old, learning about firearm safety. My dad had always been an instructor. So as soon as I had the opportunity to, I got my instructor's licenses through the NRA classes. I've been doing that for several years, worked in different gun shops. I actually met John, who is the host and owner of the Gun Collective. We were working at a gun store together back when I was 19 years old, and he took my job. So that's how I met John. And I started working for TGC after that, and I've just been doing this stuff ever since.
Man, that's just a lot. And you mentioned TGC being a lot of work and all that. Mm-hmm. I've noticed on you being on the TGC podcast quite a bit that you're one heck of a critical thinker, and you articulate yourself way better than I would ever really hope to do myself. But I'm really curious. Do you have conversations like that with your friends just on the side?
Oh, all the time. And it's really great. I'm blessed to have friends who are on the same level of thinking as I am. It took a while for me to get there. Pretty much everyone I knew from high school completely shunned me when I started being open about my beliefs. I'm 25, so I grew up in that era where guns are terrible and everyone who owns guns are evil and bad. So I had to find a new group of friends, but obviously, Rob, Sarah Albrecht. She's my best friend in the entire world. I love having conversations with her. We really play well off of each other's ideas, and I think we make each other better people.
Man, that's cool. Iron sharpens iron. That's one of the reasons why I'm trying to hang out with Rob Pincus more. I mean, he's a stud to say the least. But now you, Genevieve, you've just become a part of, or I guess maybe you helped found holdmyguns.org, and congratulations on being the vice president, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
We mentioned you guys a couple episodes ago because, well, you're filling a niche that there's really no good answer for. And I'm curious if you can tell our audience more about that and how you started and what you hope to accomplish.
Sure. So it was actually last November that Sarah had the idea, and she came to me with it, and I introduced her to a friend of mine, Joshua Prince, who is now our attorney. Thankfully, he's a great guy. And it's really taken off from there. And basically what Hold My Guns is a temporary storage solution for people who own firearms that are dealing with a personal crisis where they need a timeout from having them in the home. So we are working with different gun shops and FFLs to provide voluntary storage for people under existing consignment laws.
Man, that's good. And I know, Rob, you've done a lot with like Walk the Talk
Mhm.
America and trying to get some sort of education out there on how to prevent suicides and stuff like that. Yeah, Rob, can you shed some more light into that topic?
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt that there are times in our lives where maybe the immediate access to firearms isn't the best thing for us. That's a choice that we should make. We should make it with the support of our friends, maybe our family, maybe our mentors in the firearms community, certainly our peers in the firearms community. And we know this is especially true in the veterans and first responder environment as well. So making sure that the rest of the firearms community is educated in how to do that is really important. So the work that Hold My Guns is doing definitely falls right in with what we're doing with Walk the Talk America. It's actually an area that we're interested in, but we haven't been able to devote nearly as much time as Genevieve and Sarah have. So I actually talked to Genevieve a little bit at the 2A rally a couple weeks ago, just applauding how far they've gone down that path and really staying focused in that area has helped, I think, the community quite a bit. Because, a lot of people come back with, well, we can't do that. We can't just take people's guns. I mean, there's liability and there's issues and there's this and there's that. And what about when we give them back? And it's like, you do that every day. If you were an FFL, you literally take in people's guns, you do gunsmithing, you clean the guns, you put on sights. We just had a guy come in the shop here, wanted a new sight put on his gun. Cool, he dropped it off. We had another guy come in an hour ago. He picked up his guns that he had dropped off 2 weeks ago for cleaning. There's no difference except the emotional difference of, hey, I'm having a bad divorce. I've been drinking a lot. I just don't know that guns need to be in my house right now. Can you hold these guns for me? It's the right thing to do. We just need to educate people that it's also legal and it's relatively easy. And so again, I applaud what Hold My Guns is doing, and it's good stuff. It's important stuff.
Yeah, that's
Thanks,
something
Rob.
something I've seen, at least in my time when I was working at an FFL, there were so many times where people were just completely ignorant, for lack of a better word, on the gun laws. And here in Colorado, of course, we have a restriction on transfers. Transfers, have to occur at a licensed FFL. And so in some cases, a person could unintentionally land themselves in breaking the law if they're trying to just simply have a friend or family member maybe hold their firearms. Genevieve, I know there's 50 states, there's 50 different laws and 50 different interpretations. That's got to be a huge challenge, isn't it?
It is and it isn't. So I understand exactly what you're saying. It's the same here in Pennsylvania. If I were going through a hard time and I wanted Sarah to hold my firearms for me, I would technically be making her a felon. So we obviously don't want to do that to our friends, which is another reason why Sarah and I came up with the Hold My Guns idea. We aren't recreating the wheel in any way. We're using existing infrastructure. So in our bylaws and our partner handbooks, it does say that they need to follow all federal and state laws, depending on what state they live in. So for example, in California, I believe there's a waiting period to purchase a firearm there. So if someone were to utilize the Hold My Gun service in California, when they fill out their 4473 to get their guns returned to them, they would have to wait for X amount of time, whatever the waiting period laws are in that state. So we're following everything that already exists, which is why it's difficult, but it's not difficult at the same time. It's a lot to learn and understand, but the infrastructure is already there.
Right. And yeah, go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
I was gonna say the other thing it's important to remember, like if you're living in New Jersey and your friend's going through crisis this week and you aren't sure about the laws, you can't just take the guns from the house, you aren't friends with a local gun dealer, you can always go clean the firing pins. You can always take the barrels from the gun. I mean, there's ways to effectively remove that, because what we're talking about here isn't taking guns out of people's lives for random reasons. The idea is that a lot of suicide attempts are impulsive. And if that firearm is within reach, if that firearm is on the other side of a quick access push button code, someone going through crisis might need an extra 2 or 3 or 4 steps. Sometimes it's just, I tell people, put a Post-it note on your safe that reminds you, your kids, your mom, your future, your job, your commitment to the country, your girlfriend, your spouse, whatever it is. Like put that picture, put that Post-it note there just to cause a pause. And that's what we're trying to do. So putting that firearm 2 or 3 steps away, disassembling the firearm, or putting a critical component that isn't the serial numbered transferable firearm in somebody else's hands, that will certainly help. And again, these are simple solutions. And it kind of comes back to a lot of the things we're talking about at Save the Second. It's are there simple solutions to avoid going down these rabbit holes or getting yourself into trouble or getting our community into trouble, because we're not just looking for simple answers. We're not truly looking for solutions.
Yeah, so Genevieve, I'm curious, how exactly can somebody like me help you guys at holdmyguns.org? Yeah, I mean, I'm just a regular Joe, right? I'm a normie. So how do normies help you guys succeed?
Honestly, spreading the word. Something else that we really want to do, which Rob and Mike have done an excellent job at so far, is trying to break the stigma surrounding mental health as well. So it would mean a lot to Sarah and I if you could tell people about our organization, tell them where you could find us at holdmyguns.org, really just talk to each other, have actual meaningful conversations with people, and talk about real things. And don't be afraid to say if you're having a hard time or not. To everybody listening, sometimes you just need someone to talk to. And if we can start being open with one another, then the stigma will lessen and everything will get a lot better.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that ability to have a frank conversation, to be open and honest and just and real with each other, right? That's one of my mindsets. My primary mindset, really, when I'm looking at trying to make the NRA better. I use a quote from John F. Kennedy, and of course, John F. Kennedy says it so much more eloquently than I would ever say, but he said, "To state the facts frankly is not to despair the future nor indict the past. The prudent heir takes a careful inventory of his legacies and gives a faithful accounting to those of whom he owes an obligation of trust." And I think that goes hand in hand with just the reality of us trying to have real, open, honest conversations with our friends. Now, you're saving lives, right? I mean, that holdmyguns.org, I sure hope succeeds and is fruitful in being able to have an effect on saving people's lives and getting them, really truly the help they need. And of course, with us, we're focused on saving the NRA, which, by the way, I really would have wished the NRA would have led the way in this sort of niche, in this sort of terrible scenario, and providing a solution to this terrible situation that many people find themselves in. So within the NRA, yeah, what do you think, Genevieve? What does the NRA mean to you, and do you believe that it needs to be repaired?
Well, to be honest, I don't know an extraordinary amount about it. I got all of my instructor certifications through the NRA. So for a long time, that was the only thing that it meant to me, if I'm being honest. And I think that's true for a lot of people in the gun community as well. I mean, today, now that I know a little bit more, I would like to believe that the NRA is on the first line fighting for our rights and that they have my back, especially when I'm doing things like speaking openly about my own mental health struggles. It would mean a lot to me if I could believe in them as a first line of defense. A lot of things have come to light, and I think that the board needs to be reformed a little bit, which I'm sure you'll ask more questions about that and get into that in a moment. But, if I'm being completely honest, right now in the climate that it is, I don't know what the NRA is to me anymore.
Yeah, and that's such a hard one. We've seen so many disenfranchised, members or even ex-members of the NRA, and yeah, it's becoming more of a gray area to me. Rob, hey, same question, man. What is the NRA to you, and how do you believe it needs to be repaired?
Well, I mean, obviously, we're in line with the 5 tenets of reform with Save the Second. I think that starting with reform at the board, and certainly the influence at the board and a new group of executive leadership officers that the NRA could have, that's really the long-term goal. The short term, and this really came out a lot, interacting with people as I do through my classes primarily and through teaching. I get one kind of demographic, and I get a demographic that, has probably aligned themselves somewhat with my thought process, or they wouldn't be showing up at Personal Defense Network or on my social media or in my classes. Being at the 2A rally a couple weeks ago in DC and having people that, weren't just there to see Rob or weren't aligned with me, maybe even were disaligned with me in some areas of Second Amendment rights conversations, seeing thousands of people come together with 30 different speakers, a lot of different perspectives, including former NRA board members and one current NRA board member, was really interesting because the NRA was not completely absent from the conversation. And obviously there was a lot of negative, expression about concern, but they weren't necessary for the conversation. And I think that surprised a lot of people from outside that the NRA isn't involved, or how is the NRA involved, or is the NRA going to be involved, or did you not let the NRA be involved? Like, why wasn't the NRA part of it? The NRA is not part of it because for a lot of people, they're not part of the conversation right now. They're in crisis mode. They're circling the wagons. They're not engaging. They're not collaborating. They're certainly not trying to form coalitions. And they're really talking to themselves and talking to an ever smaller demographic of people who are supporting the current leadership. So they're becoming less and less relevant, which is what we've been talking about for 6 months now, very loudly. It's coming to fruition. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and Genevieve mentioned it just a little bit ago. The paycheck, the salary that Wayne LaPierre received, which in 2018, which was just released this past week with their 2018 tax filings. The Washington Post reported it, New York Times reported it, Wall Street Journal reported it, and others. So apparently, Wayne LaPierre has over $2 million given to him. I cannot wrap my head around $2 million. Heck, my house and cars don't equal the amount that he spent on a few suits. Yeah, it's a crazy thing to me. Washington Post says 57% increase in his paycheck from 2017. That just left me speechless. And on our Facebook page, man, it was a lightning rod. We had so many comments and so many questions and back and forth. Genevieve, Genevieve, do you hope to one day make $2 million at holdmyguns.org?
I don't believe that is a realistic goal for me. I would love to be a millionaire. Who wouldn't love to be a millionaire? But right now I'd be happy with an extra $20,
Yeah.
So that's a ton of money. I can't imagine what it's like to have that much money.
Yeah. It just leaves me speechless. It really does. I had to go back and research a little bit. A 2016 Charity Navigator study reported that the average nonprofit CEO makes a little bit more than $123,000 a year, which would be only 5% of what Wayne LaPierre made in 2018 alone. Holy good Lord. Rob, hey, give me something for my speechlessness. That's just, I don't understand it. Go for it.
I do a lot of nonprofit stuff. I have yet to, I think I'm on 4 boards, maybe 5 nonprofits, and I have yet to take a paycheck. I've been reimbursed for a couple of expenses here and there, but for the most part, it's an investment for me. And I think that Genevieve's in the same boat with holdmyguns.org. I don't think she's drawn a paycheck. I realize that at some point, as these things grow, they start to demand a lot of time. I had a great conversation with an NRA board member recently about how he limits his philanthropic work, including the work he does for the NRA board, because he doesn't take any money out. He's one of the board members that insists on paying in only, and paying in with time quite often. And that's sort of how I've approached all the nonprofit work that I do. But I do foresee a potential that there'll be a time when I'm not on the range teaching as much. I'm maybe in DC more or doing more media, and there may be a paycheck. But the idea that even the way you asked the question, I kind of felt the cringe a little bit there, Genevieve, because making this so important and being so valuable and providing something through these nonprofits that we're doing, to the point where it has to be used to justify paying bills. We have to take some money out to pay some bills so that we can do the good work, is the dream. It's not the idea that you're going to become a millionaire through saying you're doing good work, right? Like, now, if I become a millionaire because of Avidity Arms takes off, great. I haven't become a millionaire after 20 years of providing educational information, so that's not going to happen anymore, right? And again, it was about the teaching. Now it's about building a gun, or it's about helping with mental health, or it's about Second Amendment advocacy. So you have to kind of rewind the clock. When, for Wayne LaPierre, did this become about the money? And I know, it was the day he got hired, because he wasn't living the Second Amendment advocacy lifestyle. He wasn't living the gun owner lifestyle. He wasn't part of the community. He wasn't a grassroots leader that built up his own organization and built it up to a time when he needed to take a paycheck because he was taking his time away from his other efforts. His other efforts where he was a Democratic lobbyist, right? So he just took a job. So in some ways, we get it. Like, and I would not ever say that Wayne LaPierre hasn't become a believer in what he was doing along the way. But at some point, he definitely has lost sight of the greater good and the greater mission. And as I said when I shared the story, he's become much more of a liability and a burden to the American gun owning community than he is an asset. And when did that change happen? I don't know. but it definitely has been more than a decade. A lot of people recognize it, and putting a number on it, putting $2.2 million in 2018 on it is obviously really emotional for a lot of people. It's a trigger for a lot of people. I'll be devil's advocate for a second. Let's remember, this is being reported by most of the news outlets in the most negative way possible. That payment structure for 2018 of over $2 million included about $500,000 in unclear bonus type money and about $500,000 in a disbursement from his retirement. Now, if you go back about 5 or 6 years ago, he also took, I think it was like $3 million from his retirement as an early retirement disbursement. And there was another large chunk paid. So I don't think 2018 is actually the year in which he has taken the most money. But the way it's being reported is that his pay, take out that $500,000 disbursement, was still in excess of $1.5 million. And we've been reporting around it being 1.1, 1.2 for most of the last 6 months as being egregious. And now we're finding out that in 2019, it might also be over $2 million again. And most importantly, the most important part of that article is while he's taking out extra money, we're also paying his advisor's law firm over $13 million. And take those two numbers, 13 point something and 2 point something, add them together, over $15 million less was spent in 2018 through the Institute for Legislative Action. The primary reason that I think most gun owners support the NRA is so that they will do the work of the ILA. They will help us with fighting gun laws and gun restrictions nationally and at state levels. 15 million extra dollars out the door to Wayne and Bill Brewer, two guys, and 15 million less dollars spent in 2018 for American gun owners. That's the important part there.
And not only is that a crazy amount of money, but look at 2018. Look at what the NRA accomplished in 2018. Well, first of all, Kerry Guard was going on during that time and crashing and burning into the ground. I mean, that was just like a freaking meteorite that just went right into the dirt. It was an absolute disaster and another multi-million-dollar waste of money. And at the same time in 2018, you also had the Democrats take control of the House, right? So, I mean, that was a pretty big upset. And I know that a lot of contention has been had recently with the NRA's ineffectiveness with trying to regain states. Like, for example, Virginia. We mentioned Virginia, last week, and how Virginia has gone entirely blue, right in the NRA's backyard. So it just, not only does it seem like a waste of money, but it seems like money that was desperately needed to go elsewhere. Now,
yeah, and don't forget bump stocks, because while bump stocks did affect in 2019, that really was initiated and pretty much committed to by the Trump administration in 2018.
And if I remember right, too, 2018 was also when Chris Cox was in favor of ERPOs.
Right. Yeah, that was a very, and again, you have to look at that. I get it. And I think, I'd love to hear what you think about this, Genevieve. There's a conversation that needs to be had about the gun community having a voice in the ERPO conversation, because those laws are coming whether we like it or not. And if we're not part of the conversation, we're going to have less due process and more unfairness and more room for abuse. So I do empathize a little bit with the attacks against the NRA and Chris Cox about, saying, hey, we have to be part of this conversation. And that doesn't mean you're for red flag laws. It means we recognize the reality of, if we sit on the sidelines, they're going to be the worst possible version of red flag laws. But actually, Genevieve, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I just want to make sure that I have my facts correct. I did a little bit of research before I hopped on this podcast here. But back in 2018, I found a direct quote from Chris Cox saying that Congress should fund ERPOs and red flag laws. So where I agree with your sentiment, Rob, is that we need to be part of the conversation. And Sarah and I have been trying to do as much of that as we can. And that means speaking to people who have very different opinions than we do, which is never easy. I think that the way that Chris worded it seemed more like he was ready to fight for and support these laws, which I, as a person, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not any other organizations I'm part of, I'm incredibly against red flag and ERPO laws. I want to be a part of the conversation, and I still will not budge on my stance of being against them.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, is that wording from Cox really was a statement of support. But my understanding is, if he wasn't saying, yeah, we get it, these have to happen, he wasn't going to be invited to the table to talk about how they had to happen it was a ham-fisted move that obviously didn't play well, I think, on either side for the NRA. But what's most important is, regardless of whether we like them or not, the gun community must engage. The leadership of the gun community, the legislative advisors, the advocates, we must be involved in this conversation, and especially people who are educated at least a little bit, or aware that there's an education to be had from the mental health side. You know, in like 2 days, I'm going to be out in Reno. We're going to be doing another one of our continuing education credited state-approved firearms literacy courses for mental health professionals, where they come in, they pay a nominal fee, they spend 4 hours with us that includes some range time, and they learn about what it means to be a responsible gun owner. They learn about gun culture and the gun community so that they can better serve gun owners who are in crisis or living with any kind of mental health issue. These kinds of conversations, we need to be having them. And unfortunately, the NRA went, bumbled into that area really ham-fistedly and in a way that backfired, because they could have potentially educated a lot of gun owners on why we have to be part of the conversation. And instead it came out as if we support them, we think they're a good idea. I think that they're a horrible idea, but if they're going to be around, I want them to have, clear path to restoration of rights. I want them to clearly involve mental health professionals. I want them to absolutely have the due process issues that everybody's worried about. And I also want there to be a cap on the costs and a penalty for false reporting and abuse. But if we're not involved in those conversations, the people that just want to take our guns away and weaponize mental health issues, they're not going to put those things in those laws.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem that I see in Colorado, with our ERPO that's going into effect in, just a little less than 2 months now, and, January 1st. There's no provision in that law that passed for any sort of, well, really due process, of course, but beyond that, any sort of mental help. I mean, they've essentially, weaponized it. They really have, so that, the way the law is written, that, heck, if, one of the guys that I was, in the barracks with back in 2003, if he has a problem with me, he can call, my county sheriff and have them come out and essentially confiscate their gun, my firearms, with no due process and no mental help and no digging into what's going on, really. And that's, that is a scary thing to me. And man, I wish that was one of the things I stated at the NRA annual meeting, Rob, when, of course, you were there at the members meeting. The NRA did absolutely nothing to help us, with the ERPO and the situation now that we find ourselves in. We're not seeing that. And it's a lack of leadership, but also it's failed leadership. And speaking about leadership, the president of the NRA, who is Carolyn Meadows, she had a response to the paycheck, the news that came out about Wayne LaPierre's over $2 million compensation in 2018. She said, quote, "Wayne LaPierre's compensation reflects his enormous contributions to our members and the freedoms for which they fight." Continuing on, she said, "His contributions to the NRA have been transformative." I mean, my goodness, great, transformative, like destruction transformative? Oh my goodness gracious. Genevieve, have you seen a transformation in the NRA?
No, I have not. The only thing I've seen from the NRA is bump stocks being banned.
I'm surprised you haven't got more, letters in the mail for, requesting money. I mean, I get like at least a letter a day.
Yeah. I get emails, and all the emails promise that if I donate to them, I'll get a free iPhone or a range bag or something that I really couldn't care less about.
Oh man, that's one of my biggest complaints. I mean, imagine if the NRA, instead of sending all those solicitations to all of its members, imagine if they sent letters and phone calls galore to state representatives, congressional, congressmen, and so on. I mean, the amount of manpower wasted, and it's frustrating to me, at least in my opinion. Rob, what do you think of all that?
Yeah, I got taken off the mailing lists, a long time ago, but I am on the no call list and all that. So I feel like I'm missing out on all these social media photo ops when I get the solicitations for, we need money to fight New York. Meanwhile, again, $2.2 million going to Wayne and 13.8 going to Bill Brewer. That's obviously where far too much money is going. So forget about how much they're paying for bulk mail rates, And, it's unfortunate. It must work. I mean, I actually need to get on that list with Gun Owners of America, because I got down here, I was gone for a few weeks, and I had a bunch of letters from them. Same thing. So that works, right? We get it. Like, at some point, I'm going to have Mike Sedini and I need to remember that even though we're going to get consultants come and tell us like mass mailing works, you should do it for Walk the Talk America. We're going to remember these conversations and be part of them and maintain some integrity and say, it's just not what we think we should be doing with our time, with our effort, with our energy. The NRA, we talk about transformation. The transformation that's happened with the NRA under Wayne LaPierre, of course, under Wayne LaPierre and Ackerman McQueen, was the transformation of it being a true, representing all American gun owners, focused on gun rights organization, to a hard right, small niche, small demographic of gun owners based lifestyle entity. It's a brand more than it is a lobbying organization. I've said that a lot. That's really the transformation. That's not one that he deserves any credit for, but it's certainly one that he's earning a lot of money on. And my guess is that his contract was set up that way. I mean, let's remember his contract originally heavily influenced going back to the leadership at Ackerman McQueen. Their contract grew over the years. That's a big transformation that happened under his regime. And I'm sure his contract with those bonuses, those unspecified $500,000 in 2018, probably a lot of that had to do with metrics that were set up based on revenue from donors and from that small niche that's very easily motivated, through the fear mongering, through the identity politics, through the hatred of the mainstream media, through the, always Trump's the man, even though don't worry about the bump stocks thing, Trump's still cool. All that kind of rhetoric has been the transformation, and none of that's good.
How did you get off the mailing list? I'm sorry to sidetrack, but I have tried. I have sent emails and I've said, please don't send me these anymore. I've yelled at people over the phone. Guess what I get 5 times a day? How did you do it?
I don't know what. To be honest, they may have just removed me like on their own. They may have said, no, let's not give this guy any more ammunition. We're just going to leave him alone for a while. They called me one time. I remember I was standing outside of dinner with a class, and the phone call was, it was back during the small arms treaty issue with the UN. And it was, Rob Bays, hey, we're calling today from the National Revolution. Do you believe that the United Nations troops should occupy American land and take away our guns? No. Okay, well, we'd like you to support our efforts to keep that from happening by buying this limited edition buck knife for $252 or whatever. So I was like, okay, so wait, you want me to buy the knife and then stab the United Nations? And it was silence. Wait, okay, so let me get straight. I get the knife, then I go to New York City to the building of the United Nations, and you want me to do what? I'm like, shouldn't we use guns? Should we use guns to stop the troops? Or you want me to use the knife? I'm in. Just tell me what to do, NRA. And they haven't called since.
So I'll just name drop you next time they call me then, and I'll never get a call again.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I need to do the same thing. And what's worse is last year, Genevieve,
I recorded
after the TGC panel, not this year, but last year, my wife was like, oh man, I'd love to go and be a part of that too. And I'm like, oh, great. Well, of course, just to get into the NRA annual meeting, you have to be a member. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't a member at the time. She was like, okay, I'll get an annual membership. And now we get twice the amount of letters and twice the amount of phone calls. Yeah. Okay. So from now on, pick up the phone, just say Rob Pincus. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now, a lot of this, obviously, it is a systemic problem. It's not just Wayne LaPierre being the problem. And in order to really make reformations and to fix the NRA, well, it's not a magic pill, right? We can't just, do one thing, get one person in. A lot of us, myself included, of course, were really pulling for Adam Kraut back in the day, when he was running. And I was naive. I'm like, oh yeah, he's going to get in there and he's going to, do a legal brief, in front of all of the board members, and everything's going to be great. That's not the way it works, unfortunately. And so reality's set in for me. It's got to be a transformation of the board of directors, really, that enables a total NRA reformation. And as Rob was mentioning a while ago, we have 5 different goals to try to reform the NRA. Right now, we've got a term limit petition going on, and you mentioned Josh Prince a while ago. Josh Prince being, your lawyer. I've got his signature right back here. Don't tell anybody, but he signed our petition, for term limits, and we're hoping to hold the NRA board of directors accountable to no more than 12 years of service on the board. That's what the petition is, and it's a weird way to try to get these petitions passed through. okay, so the NRA bylaws are what dictates what goes on in the NRA, essentially how it works. And in order for these sort of petitions to go through, well, it's really a proposal, right? It's a bylaw amendment proposal by petition. And we had one that was at the fall board meeting for attendance. Like, we want Marion Hammer to actually show up to meetings, and I guess, we should pat ourselves on the back that she's actually shown up to a couple. But yeah, right. Two of them. Hopefully we'll get a third here in January, but it seems like we're fighting a big uphill battle. And ironically, I think holdmyguns.org and Save the Second, we have a similar issue where we're trying to get the word out, and we're trying to educate, these people that would potentially join us, or, perhaps in your case, use your services and whatnot. So how do you think we best get the word out to get, term limit petitions out, and information on holdmyguns.org? Genevieve, you've done so much in social media. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I mean, anybody can be an influencer is the first thing that I'll say. I mean, you don't need to have a gigantic audience. You don't need to have, connections in the industry. Anybody can get their own message out if they want to. All you have to do is start somewhere. That's what John told me when I started. And, it's actually solid advice. And I think that everyone just needs to speak their truth and be open and honest with one another, support different organizations like GOA, which I forget which one of you mentioned that, but GOA is a great organization. So is FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition. And the petition that you mentioned, actually, it's funny, I wasn't aware that there was one until I went to shoot at my local club, and there was a petition going around, the petition you're talking about.
I know exactly who put that one out too. It's our friend Frank Tate.
Oh, I love Frank.
Yeah, so Frank is running for the board of directors this next year. He is now he got the required amount of signatures in order for him to be running by petition for the NRA board of directors. And so far, he is the only candidate that has expressed support for our goals. And yeah, Frank is a good guy. We got to hang out with him at the fall NRA board of directors meeting. Yeah, Frank. Oh my gosh, that guy is amazing. I'm curious now, Genevieve, how did you first meet Frank?
So Lower Providence Rod and Gun Club was basically where I grew up. He's like one of my uncles, and all the guys there, they helped raise me. So that's where I know him from. And I don't know anyone else in that area that you might know. I probably know them too. But I was stoked to see that petition going around, and you get like a little nervous at first when someone comes up to you. They're like, "Hey, here's a petition for the NRA," and I didn't know. And a lot of times with like a crowd that's a little bit older, it's something in support of the NRA. And I was like, oh, great, this conversation now. And they're like, this is for term limits. And I was into it. I think it's awesome. I hope that gets around. And if there's anything that I can do, please let me know. And, because you guys know a tremendous amount more about this effort than I do. But I think just getting the word out there, talking about it, really doing some research and knowing the facts before we start talking and forming our own opinions, I think is really important.
Now, of course, Rob Pincus, I'm talking to you, Genevieve, about social media, and Pincus is over here, Mr. Captain social media, all the stuff that you did for the 2A rally, Rob. Oh my goodness gracious. And congratulations, Rob, on getting it squared away for next year, man. I cannot wait for that. That's going to be awesome. But what do you think, Rob? How do we reach the masses? Better yet, how do we educate the masses? It's one thing to pay for a Facebook ad. It's one thing to have a petition on a gun counter, table. But how do we really educate people?
Yeah, it's the message. We're all grassroots influencers, right? It's what Genevieve just said, what John told her. Does it help to have 500,000 followers on YouTube? Absolutely, right? But we have to remember that ultimately the things that we care about and the people that we care about are what we need to be sharing, right? If we want to be influential, then we need to be talking to people that we care about and that care about us, and we need to be talking about the things that we actually care about. So it's one thing to, for me to put out somebody sends me a gun or a holster and they say, hey, check this out. And I do a video on it. And it wasn't anything like I sought out. It was just somebody asked me to talk about it. I found some good things, some bad things. I share that information, and, people are going to find it through a Google search or find it on YouTube. When I have something I really care about, you mentioned the 2A rally or any of the stuff that we do with Save the Second, that's going to get promoted really heavily. And people that are following my social media all the time are going to see it 4, 5, 6 times, over the course of a week or 2 weeks or a month, because it's important. So, Genevieve, same thing. If you got excited about the term limits, that's awesome. And if you could share we just put out a short video at our YouTube, our Instagram TV. We put out a call to action again through Instagram and through our Facebook. So sharing that kind of stuff, then you have to make other people care about it, right? So if you're listening to this and you can share those videos, that's great. Share the post, share the link to the download the petition page and all that. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is get the people you're talking to, because you're already watching this, right? You're already watching the videos. We want to get the people that you're talking to care just as much as you do. And that's probably going to happen in a longer format. That's going to happen maybe at our blog, where you're going to read the articles. You're going to see the links to the articles in the press. You're going to see the things that former board members and current board members are saying. You're going to see what the advocates who've been involved in this, like Jeff Knox, who's been involved with it since birth, right? Like 40 years plus, he's been involved in gun rights advocacy. You read the articles at AmmoLand. There's a lot of good people writing stuff at AmmoLand. It's very revealing, and you can trust this stuff, right? Just because it's even stuff, if it's in the Washington Post, you're like, oh, well, they lean anti-gun. Well, tax returns are tax returns, right? Press releases are press releases. So you have to be willing to do the work to really understand it, I think, before you can get terribly motivated enough to be able to educate other people. So it starts with just watching those videos and sharing the links and the posts. But then eventually we really want you to get into the articles we're sharing through the blog and some of the more in-depth stuff we're doing through like the Facebook page, because that's where you're going to get more information so you can educate other people so they'll care about this just as much as you.
Man, that's a great way to put it, man. Yeah, that makes me motivated to start, hitting the share button a little bit more, even though there's not as many people that like my stuff as yours. Oh my goodness gracious. Hey, let's go to the comments real fast. Mr. Doobie Lou has a very interesting question, I think. It says, in the existing bylaws, is there a way us members can remove Wayne LaPierre or any other officer? The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's ridiculously difficult. Rob, you've done a little bit of research on this. You want to take that one?
Yeah, in fact, there was a conversation going around amongst board members prior to the September meeting, where board members were taking this pretty seriously, looking at whether or not they could, in a very, very short term, as quickly as the September board meeting during the summer, try to come up with the starting point, where the starting point is a pretty high bar. It's 7,500 plus signatures. And it's kind of arcane. You have to get deep into the bylaws and understand that the number of signatures from voting members of the NRA that you need for these types of petitions for a recall, they're related to the number of NRA voting members that voted in the last board election. So it's not a fixed number. It just so happens that this year, because of the number of people that voted last spring or last winter for the last spring election of members in the board, the number comes out to about 7,500. It'll probably be about the same. That's a relatively high bar. So when you look at how hard people have to work to get on the ballot, like Frank Tate did, to get his signatures. When you look at, even what we're doing right now, we have a relatively low bar with a proposal for a bylaw change, but we're still out there telling you, hey, you've got just about 2 weeks left, I think, to get us, maybe a little less than that. You've got to get those petition forms back to us by December 2nd, which I think is it 2 weeks from tomorrow? I think it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. Yeah. So we need you to get those in. Now, imagine if we're trying to do, I think it's, what would it be? It would be 30 times as many signatures that we would need if we were trying to do a recall initiative, or if we were trying to get something that wasn't a vote for a board member onto the ballot and the actual ballot that gets mailed out. And a lot of people are talking about potentially doing that if there isn't any significant change in the structure or the leadership or the strategies of the NRA. So I think that's a tactic that you should be looking for to come out from us, from some other people, maybe even from some brave board members next spring. After the election of new board members, if we still haven't seen any major change by the NRA annual meeting, you can expect to see some really heavy work to petition drive 7,500 plus voting member signatures next year to really force the will of the members upon this circled wagons leadership we've got right now.
And keep in mind, the members meeting was a big one too. The members meeting, Genevieve, Frank Tate had written the resolution to remove Wayne LaPierre at the members meeting. And my goodness gracious, if we had had that rooms stacked with people that understood the corruption going on in our NRA, it would be a different NRA right now. It really would.
And on that note, before we get to rallying people to be at the members meeting, which is important, it's also incredibly important that people think about attending the board meeting that is going to happen on January 11th in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. It's really, it was amazing for those of us who were there. I was there for 3 days. I was the only one there on one day. Then we had a couple other people show up the next day. We had about 20 in the room the last day. The board does not want us there, even though the bylaws say that members can attend the board meeting. The board doesn't want us there. The NRA doesn't want us there. Wayne LaPierre certainly doesn't want us there. We need to go there and remind them who they work for. As much as we talk about that with our elected officials in DC, even more so in a company where the CEO has taken home over $2 million of our dollars that we're putting into it, whether it's by spending money at Midway USA or by donating or by going to a Friends of an NRA banquet or paying for our memberships. We need to show up. We need hundreds of members, if not thousands, to crash that board meeting in January in Tyson's Corner on January 11th. They may make us stand outside, but we need to be there to be heard.
Totally agree, man. That's going to be a big one. Genevieve, have you ever been involved in an organization that needed to be changed? I mean, this is new ground for me. Have you experienced anything like that?
I'm very lucky to say I haven't. Obviously, I am, Hold My Guns is the first nonprofit that I've ever been a part of. And I'm really lucky to work alongside people who are like-minded and people who get along really well. I've been friends with some of the people who used to be on the board of the NRA, and I've heard things from them and, just as friends communicating. So I am aware of some of the struggles. I'm thankful to not have to be in a position like this ever before. I'm not a huge fan of debates. I'm not a huge fan of politics. I mean, who really is, I guess, but in the state of the climate now, we all sort of don't have a choice anymore, I think. But no, there's a first time for everything. I'm learning a whole lot, and I hope to see it change. I did go to a board meeting once for the NRA. I believe it was last year. I don't know if you were there or not, Rob. You might have been. And I forget who said it, but one of the board members for the NRA said something along the lines of, we can't tell you guys everything because you can't handle knowing the truth of what really goes on behind closed doors. And that's all I remember, but it made me very angry.
Yeah, that was, she was standing on the platform arguing with me when she said that. Well, there were actually a couple of male board members and Marion Hammer. They all said that, you members just need to trust us. And that was right after I had called for transparency, ironically referencing Wayne LaPierre's speech about how important the First Amendment is. I noticed that they aren't talking much about that since that members meeting, but prior to that members meeting, they were making quite a big deal about the First Amendment and transparency because of their defense of actions against the New York Attorney General's office being based on a First Amendment right to do business in the state of New York, whether the government likes guns or not. And when I reminded them of that, others have been reminding them of that all spring, all of a sudden they stopped talking about the First Amendment quite as loudly.
Now, Genevieve, I got to tell you, like I said, I'm a big fan of the TGC podcast, and this past week or I guess it was maybe a little bit more so when you were talking with Matt Christensen, mm-hmm. you mentioned a very interesting time where you were having a chat with a guy after your apartment power went out. Now, that's something that I haven't heard in a while, where you were able to essentially change his mind, and that's kind of a big one for us because we had, when we put out the story about Wayne LaPierre's paycheck, there were so many people that came to Wayne LaPierre's defense and said, "Well, good, I'm glad he's making that much money," and blah blah blah. And you've had firsthand experience with being able to essentially educate somebody that had a completely different view than you. So what are some pointers that you would give to people that are trying to have those sort of hard conversations?
I think the reason why that worked out so well for me is because I'm not someone who likes to debate. I go into conversations holding fast to my own beliefs, but not with the goal of changing someone else's mind. And I know that sounds a little bit weird because that's the whole point, right? I just really think that when people go in and they say, I have to leave this conversation with this person agreeing with me or I've failed, then it tends to be more along the lines of an angry conversation. And people never like to be told that they're wrong, and people never like to be made feel like they are idiotic in any way. So when someone has information in their mind that they think is false, perception is reality, right? So they are unable to see that their perception is incorrect. So I almost go on the tactic of saying, I understand why you think that, and I would totally think the same thing if I had seen what you saw, or if I had read what you read, and here's the facts as I know it. And you sort of have a conversation about facts and not so much about opinions or anger or hostility. And it's hard not to be upset anymore, especially when it feels like everybody is on a different side. Even the gun community themselves, we're all on such different sides. And I really think it's important for us to just all come together with unity, and we can fight all of this stuff if we just agree to talk to each other in a civilized way.
Man, that's a great way to put it. It really is. Rob, it looks like you've got to punch out, man. Do you have any last questions, comments, and all that good stuff?
No, I think it's been a good conversation, Genevieve. I appreciate you coming on, and especially, we haven't had very many people on who don't have super strong opinions on the NRA situation, or have really kind of jumped into it. And as someone who, like you said, you went through the instructor process, and that's what a lot of people do, and you just kind of, it is what it is. That's how you become an instructor in the firearms community, or that's how you teach at certain ranges, or that's how you get qualified to teach the CCW course. And the NRA has benefited from that kind of just, laissez-faire approach to, oh yeah, I'm a member, or I'm an instructor. And I appreciate you coming on to talk about and maybe even learn about some of the stuff that's really going on and what you can do to help change it. Because there's too many people out there that are okay with, well, I'm only an instructor, I'm not really supporting them, but you are. You're advertising for them, you're paying into the coffers, you're encouraging ranges to support their training programs, which is a big way that the NRA sort of keeps its hooks in. Like you said, a lot of the older population in the shooting community just hasn't even really been paying attention to this, and they've loved the NRA for 30, 40, 50 years. It's going to take education and awareness to change this, and that means advocacy. That does mean getting into some debates. It does certainly mean having discussions. I think at the end of the day, what you were talking about is what I usually refer to as common ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's fake common ground, like, let's pretend for a second that I had grown up the way you grew up, heard the things you heard, watched the TV shows you watched. I can empathize with your point of view. Here's some other things to consider, and maybe you can get them to see that other common ground. And I think that's what we've been doing with the NRA situation. We've been so conditioned. I mean, if you're an NRA fan and you watched NRA TV and you listen to Dana Loesch tell you that the mainstream media is full of lies, well, then how can you believe it when Washington Times or New York Times or Washington Post publishes a story that happens to be negative towards Wayne LaPierre? You've been conditioned for years to think it's a lie, even if it's not. And that takes some rational conversation and some common ground finding. So appreciate you coming on. And yeah, I do have to jump. I got to get back into the office here and out of my mobile office and into the real office where it's a little noisier.
Rob, always good having you on, buddy. I love you to death. I think you're amazing, and I really want to shoot with you sometime soon, man.
I'll be back in Colorado for, I think 13, maybe 15 hours tomorrow night, but so probably not. But sometime maybe this winter we'll get together, man.
Cool, dude. See you later.
Thanks.
Good to see you, Rob.
So Genevieve, before I start telling everybody about, some of the stuff that we're, hoping
Sure.
our members will go for, I'm looking at your website right now. In fact, I'm going to do this real fast. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here for everybody to see.
Sweet.
Of course,
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody that's not, anybody that's listening to the podcast, obviously is going to be at a lack, but they can go to holdmyguns.org and check out this lovely website. My goodness, your website is awesome. I really do like it. Let me widen it out a
Thank
little
you.
bit for you. Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed was a way to donate right there. Donate now. Yeah. Hey, you guys reached a goal of $5,000 right out of the gate, man. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. That was such a tremendous help. And everyone who donated, I mean, it's not just that they were helping fund all the legal fees that were coming out of Sarah and I's own pocket, but every dollar that someone donated was really just a symbol of their belief in us. And that means so much. I can't even begin to express how much that means to me.
Yeah, I'm going to be donating to you guys pretty soon. But I mean, you've already reached one goal. I mean, are you going to have any new goals and whatnot?
Yeah, we definitely want to. There's some stuff in the works that is going to be coming to fruition very soon. We've had our first official board meeting. We've gotten our approval for our 501c3 and all of these things that, you know, with everything on the legal side, it took months. I mean, it took so long to get everything straightened out, but things are really starting to come together, and we're so excited to actually start our pilot program and start making a difference and actually helping people.
Man, I'm so excited for you guys. I think that's so cool. Such a great mission. It really is. Now, for us at Save the Second, man, we've got a lot of irons in the fire. Not only do we have the term limit petitions, which we were talking about just a little bit ago, but we have a campaign called 76 and 76 or hashtag 76 and 76. We're encouraging members, just regular members of the NRA, to contact their NRA board of directors. And we've tried to get as many contact emails and Facebooks and Twitters and LinkedIns as we can so that people can send them messages. Folks, go check that out, 76 and 76. We mentioned the NRA Board of Directors meeting January 11th in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. And beyond that, of course, we've got the NRA annual meeting coming up. And Genevieve, you guys are back at the, well, at least you're not going to be affiliated rather with the NRA, but hosting the TGC panel. Do you guys have a location yet?
Not yet. So you know what, whatever, I plan it. So there is one location that I'm going to be speaking to someone about that I think is super awesome, and I really hope it works out. It's a huge sort of rooftop thing, and you probably know which place I'm talking about if you're familiar with Nashville. So the only caveat to that is it's really, really hard to predict weather for like 6 months from now, you know? So I have to talk to the owner and see if there's a plan in case it rains, because with all the audio equipment and everything, that just wouldn't be something that would be able to happen if he didn't have a backup plan. So that's a conversation that's in the works. It's definitely happening. And we're super, super excited every year. The support is incredible, and I might actually be on the panel this year. So.
Oh, now that would be even more exciting. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the questions from the audience, man. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I feel valid enough to be able to do it now, I think.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, definitely so. I was in Nashville on Thursday, and I got a chance to go down to Music City Center, the convention floor where the NRA annual meeting is going to be, and the Cambria Hotel is, I mean, it's a stone's throw, and there's a ton of construction going on down there right now, but literally it's less than 100 yards away. And it has an indoor quasi bar, but also like a private event area. And man, I tell you what, if you guys don't end up taking that, I think we might have at least some sort of shindig or something during that time. Now, of course, the Brown Ales crew always does fun stuff, which I'm curious to see where they're going to be. But we're not even at Thanksgiving, and I'm looking at the annual meeting, and I'm so excited. I really am. It's always a good time for me.
Well, the people in the industry are so incredible too. I mean, and it's easy for me to say because I grew up around gun people, you know, but just to hear the perspectives of other people who didn't grow up that way, that are afraid to be a part of the community, it just blows my mind. And I've never met as nice and kind-hearted and generous people as I have met since I've started working in the industry.
You know, I can say the same. I really can. And I've only truly been in the industry, you know, when I was working at a gun shop a while back and as an instructor, just, you know, I've less than 10 years, I've been affiliated with, in some form or fashion, with the firearms industry. And I can say the exact same thing. I really can. Man, that's one heck of a note to end this on. How about that? Yeah. So Genevieve, thank you so very much for, you know, taking time out of your Sunday to come and chat with us. Thank you so much for what you're doing at holdmyguns.org. Folks, yeah, you can, you know, find us more, of course, on savethesecond.org, and holdmyguns.org is where you can find Genevieve, and TGC is where you can also see all the great stuff that she's doing there. All of us at Save the Second are volunteers. Okay. Special thanks to those of you who have believed in our cause and donated to Save the Second. You know, those petition drives are still out, man. Thank you so much for your generosity. What we really need most is your involvement. Please, 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 please be involved and contact your NRA board of directors. I'll wrap it up with the Second Amendment. We love the Second Amendment, right? Hey, Save the Second. Hey, Second Amendment, here it is. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you very much for watching, listening. Enjoy your Sunday.